Hey everybody, so the Western Conference has their own version of the Columbus Blue Jackets in the East, and it comes in the Chicago Blackhawks, who have risen from the depths of the Western Conference up to now only 3 points out of a playoff spot. They've been playing very, very well in the last few weeks, and have really pulled themselves right back into playoff contention and right into the thick of the playoff race in the Western Conference. Before we fully get into the video, I just quickly want to remind everyone to please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Both of those things greatly help out the channel, and it's only requires 2 clicks. So it would be very, very much appreciated. So I talked about Columbus today in the East getting into a playoff spot, and now I want to talk about Chicago because they are doing almost the exact same thing as what Columbus has done. They kind of struggled the first half of the season. We're down in the standings. We're at one point for a decent amount of the season last place in the Central Division, but they never let themselves get too far out of it. And now they've gone on a run here in the last few games, and they've pulled themselves right back into playoff contention. And I think this really shows how tight the league is and how tight these playoff races really are, because you could be a last place team and still pull yourself back into playoff contention, and also shows the importance of hanging around, the importance of not letting yourself get too far back to where even if you have a good 10 or 12 game stretch, you can't make up the points and you can't get back into things. If you hang around and keep yourself with just close enough to where going on a run could get you back into things, anything can happen in the NHL. Anything can happen in the second half of the season. And quite frankly, it's a long year. It's an 82-game season. And if you keep yourself just close enough and in contention, you have a good stretch here or a good stretch there, and next thing you know, you're right back into things. And that's what we've seen with Chicago, who now through 50 games are 24-20-6 for 54 points, only 3 points out of a playoff spot in the West, which currently sit the second wild card spot. Actually, both wild card spots are at 57 points right now in the Western Conference. So Chicago is almost right back there. Now, they have a lot of teams around them. Winnipeg also has 54 points. Nashville has 51 with games in hand, and Minnesota also has 50 with games in hand. So it's certainly nothing is set. Chicago just doesn't mean they're going to make the playoffs. There's still a lot of teams fighting for playoff position in the Western Conference. The only teams I really say are out of it are the 3 California teams, Anaheim, Los Angeles, and San Jose, who are the 3 worst teams in the conference. None of those teams are at 50 points yet. So I think they're out of it, but everyone else in the West is still alive. And Chicago is, like I said, they're 7-3 in their last 10 games. They're on a 5-game win streak. They're playing very, very well as of recent. And they hung around. They hung around for the first half of the season. There were times where they did not look very good at all. There were times where they looked okay, but they never let themselves get too far back. And now they win 5 in a row. They go on this 7-3 stretch, and they're 3 points out. And just like that, in a couple of weeks, you go from last place to right back into things in the West. And they're certainly within striking distance of a playoff spot at this point. Now, the Western Conference is absolutely wild this year as far as how tight the playoff races are, specifically the Pacific Division, which currently has 5 teams all within 1 point. You have Vancouver leading the division with 58 points. Edmonton, Calgary, Vegas, and Arizona all have 57 points right now. So we don't know if 5 teams from the Pacific are going to get in, if 5 teams from the Central are going to get in, or if it's going to split 4-4. We have no idea. The Pacific Division is really making things extremely interesting in the West as far as who's going to get in the playoffs and who's not. The Central Division, a little more set, I think, particularly at the top. I think very clearly St. Louis, Colorado, and Dallas are your 3 best teams in the Central Division. St. Louis is going to win the division. Colorado and Dallas could switch back and forth, but I think it's just a matter of who finishes second and who finishes third between them. After that, things get very, very interesting. The remaining 4 teams in the Central, all in playoff contention, all within 4 points of each other in points, and all currently outside of the playoffs. Winnipeg's at 54 points. Chicago's at 54 points. Nashville's at 51, and Minnesota is at 50. They're all still in contention. A good run could put all of them into a playoff spot, or none of them could make the playoffs. That's a possibility as well. None of them could make the playoffs, and the Pacific ends up sending 5 teams to the postseason this year. So there's still a lot to be determined in the Western Conference. The race right now is very, very tight across the board in the West. And Chicago is certainly no guarantee to be a playoff team or not be a playoff team. However, it has been very, very impressive what they've been able to do the last couple of weeks. These last 10 games have been very good for them. The 5-game win streak has launched them higher in the standings. They are now ahead of Minnesota. They are ahead of Nashville. They are tied with Winnipeg. And they are within striking distance of getting into a wild card spot in the West. And I don't think a month ago anyone would have thought that Chicago would be pushing for a playoff spot, because they were the last place team in the Central. They were not looking all that great. And really, for most of the first half of the season, they struggled and looked like a bottom-feeding Western team. And now all of a sudden, things have drastically changed. So we'll see what the Blackhawks are able to do. If they're able to make a run at a playoff spot, if they end up, this just being a hot streak and they fall back when things cool off, or, if maybe they keep themselves in that race all season long and then possibly get in or possibly come just short. But there's still a lot of hockey left. It's an 82-game season for a reason. It's a long year. And like I said earlier, as long as you keep yourself in it for the first half of the season, you can make a run in the second half and possibly get into a playoff spot. We've seen that time and time again, and Chicago has the potential to do that this year. So I've been impressed with what I've seen from the Blackhawks recently, and we'll see. I'd like to see if that's able to continue or not, and if they are actually able to make a run into playoff position, or if they end up cooling off and going back down. We'll just have to wait and see. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.